Come on, do you even lift, bruh? Because I, in fact, do not lift, bruh. And this transmission is totally empty. And yes, today we are finally going to be attempting to put my Transam's 6L80E back together again. And I say attempting because I pulled this thing apart like years ago. And I mean, most of the parts should still be here. But I may have possibly lost a washer here and there. And everything that I do have is pretty much covered in cobwebs and shop dust. So I just want to cut in real quick and give you guys a little tip on how to kind of completely disassemble your valve body and put it back together without nobody being the wiser. So yeah, I completely pulled this thing apart, took all the valves out, every single moving part of each half of the valve body. I have everything kind of laid out, cleaned up. You saw I just degreased and hosed all this stuff out. I blew it out with compressed air so it's all dry and ready to go back together. And the reason for this is, like I said, this was a core transmission. So it has like clutch material, torque converter materials, a bunch of crap just thrown all through the valve body passages. I wanted to make sure I could get all that out and make sure we're not gonna end up with any stuck valves. Now, a little tip on how to do this. It looks a little intimidating because there are a lot of valves and springs and everything kind of has to go in a certain way. Pick up one of these ATSG manuals. I have one of these for the 4L60. This is very, very useful. Even though the Circle D kit comes with all the information to kind of put the clutch packs together and what the clearances should be, this also has clearances for like the stock tolerance stuff, like if you're just using all stock replacement parts, not doing like a stage 2, stage 3 kind of thing. And for the valve body, it has a total exploded view. Shows you where all the valves go, the direction they're supposed to be facing, where all the springs go for both halves. And yeah, this is what I'm going to reference to make sure all that stuff goes back exactly where it needs to be. And once it's together, then I could start going back over to the Circle D instructions because I'll have a nice clean working stock valve body, and then we could start making the modifications that come in the Circle D kit. All right, the transmission is finally together. Oh, I'm so happy I'm done with this thing. It wasn't like a hard rebuild, but I was kind of really tedious with it. I air checked everything. This is my first time doing one of these, so I wanted to make sure that everything was exactly where it's supposed to be, everything checked out, and I'm very happy. I'm confident this is going to be a very strong and reliable transmission. Please don't make me eat those words. One thing I do want to mention, earlier when I was doing the valve body, I told you to pick up one of these books if you are planning on rebuilding one of these. Definitely pick one of these up, because the Circle D instructions, they pretty much just give you instructions for the clutch packs. Like the clearances they're supposed to be, the order you want to stack them. That's basically it. Pretty much it just tells you install the seals on the pistons, install this, and then it tells you the clutch pack stuff. There are no pictures when it comes to all that. So if you haven't done one of these before, definitely pick one of these up, because this is going to show you where everything goes when it goes back together, all the exploded diagrams, where all the bearings go, what they're supposed to look like, what direction they're supposed to face, where all the O-rings are supposed to go. And yeah, definitely invaluable to have this, and I will link it down below. But onto the transmission. You can see I did go ahead and put a new bell housing on it, because as I mentioned, this was a core, and the surface where the vanes for the pump ride was completely shot, scored, wasn't going to work. So I did end up getting a new bell housing off of Amazon, genuine GM, for 106 bucks. I got the pump from the dealer. That was a little more. It was like 230. But all in all, it pretty much has a completely brand new pump now. And yeah, you can have the bell housing machine down, like inside where the vanes of the pump ride, but I don't know even who the hell I would find to do that. And then you have to also have the pump side cut, and I think there's some shims involved. At the end of the day, it was just easier to buy this stuff and just bolt it on. Another thing I did was install this little bulkhead. So this is going to allow me to hook up some 6AN hoses for the cooler, which is probably just going to be an auxiliary cooler. This goes in front of the radiator. And we have our converter installed. So this is a stock CTSV/ZL1 dual clutch, completely OEM, genuine GM converter. I think the stall is like around 2,000 or so, and the cam that's in the car was spec'd to be used with this converter, so everything should play together very, very nicely. I also did go ahead and get the appropriate flywheel to match this, and that is already bolted to the engine, or the flex plate, for anybody who cares. One more thing I did do was I kind of went off from the plans as far as the valve body modifications go. In the instructions, they say if you're running not a lot of power, or if you have a heavy vehicle, putting the stronger springs in the valve body and drilling out the separator plate, it is going to increase the firmness of the 1-2 shift, and it is going to be noticeable. How bad is it going to be? I don't know, but they do warn you in the instructions, so it might be a little bit jerky. Being this car in its NA form is going to only be making probably around 450 horsepower, all said and done. I didn't feel like breaking my neck just cruising down to Dunkin' Donuts or going to a car show with it or something, so I decided not to do that at the time. And yeah, whenever I do boost this thing, I can always just drop the valve body down, put the springs in, drill it out, put it back in, and it'll be you know, ready to hold that power, so it's not really a big issue. Right now, let's head on over to the car, and let's figure out how exactly this is going to go in, because there's no way this is going to slide under the car. It's just too damn tall. Well, you can definitely see my dilemma here. With that transmission sitting on top of this thing, it's not getting under there. Even if I pull the wheel, it's not getting under there. My jack stands are absolutely maxed out. And I don't think the engine hoist, being it's technically a front wheel drive hoist, is gonna be able to lift the front of the car for me to slide under that way. So my plan right now is to pull this guy out. We're gonna set it on the ground. I'm going to bolt the transmission to the hoist and lower the transmission into the bay, slip that guy underneath, drop it onto that. Then I could just push it back into the tunnel, get the engine back in, go underneath, slide the transmission back together, and just reassemble it that way. Whew, that was a pain in the ass. All right, so now I'm just gonna try to hopefully get that positioned a little better on the trans jack. I'm gonna throw a strap on it. And then I'm gonna drop the motor in, I'm gonna get them all happy bolted together, and I'll come check back with you guys in a minute. All right, here she is. Engine is finally bolted in place, hopefully for the last time. Transmission is in. It actually put in, it went out of fight. Like, it just bolted right up to the engine. Didn't have to struggle with it too much because that is a big son of a bitch, and I really didn't feel like wrestling with it under there. So luckily it went in without a hitch. I got all the Bellhousing bolts in. I only have 3 of the 6 converter bolts in because I found 3 OEM bolts laying around, which I don't even know where I got them from because the transmission, I bought the transmission alone. It's not like I pulled it myself, so I don't know why I had the converter bolts. But I had 3 of them, and then I ordered 3 of these, or a set of these off of Amazon. You can see they're really friggin' short. The OEM ones are probably at least like 1/4 of an inch longer than these. So I went ahead and ordered 3 more bolts. Once those come in, I could just pop them into the converter, put the starter back on, and that's pretty much gonna be it. The cross member bolts are in. The torque arm is kind of sort of mocked up. So right now I got the factory torque. I'm just sitting through the bracket on the transmission mount cross member, and that's just kind of sitting on the axle now. I didn't actually put the bolts through, but that lines up perfectly. I just got to get a bushing for the torque arm, then that could go in for good. And coming over here, because I know a lot of you guys are probably wondering what the hell I'm doing with the for the shift linkage. This is the OEM 3rd gen cable. If you look, it kind of clips on there. And I'm gonna have to make my own custom bracket for this. So these are the original mounting bolts from the 6L80E bracket. I'm just gonna fab something, have this mounted probably right here, but the length seems to be perfect. The only thing I did have to do was flip this bracket here. This used to be 180 degrees the other way, so it was facing up here, and that pretty much put the gears in the opposite position. So when you go to put the car into reverse, it would go and put it in park on the transmission. So that had to be flipped. And what I'm probably gonna do, because this doesn't exactly fit the way it's supposed to, I'm gonna probably grab a bracket from a 700 R4, see if I can modify that to fit on here. And then this will clip right onto that like factory then and be perfect. And then yeah, all I gotta do is make a bracket. The other really nice thing is for the shifter itself, it actually has the factory 3rd gen shifter and transmission has the same amount of gear selection as the 6L80. So the 3rd gen has park, reverse, neutral, drive, D3, which is drive without overdrive, and then 2 and 1. And that's the full range of the factory shifter. The 6L80 has park, reverse, neutral, drive, 3 instead of D3, 2 and 1. So it actually has the same amount of selections, which means this shifter should line up pretty damn good with the transmission, and I'll actually get full range of all the gears. So there we go, our transmission's in, our engine's in. I'm feeling good. At this point, it's really just a matter of hooking shit up and getting it running. Exhaust isn't gonna be fun, I'm not looking forward to that. And my drive shaft does need to be lengthened. This drive shaft. So yeah, you can see we need 45¼ inches on this. Right now it's like 40, 41. And the reason for that being, I moved the drivetrain in this thing like really, really far up. I wanted that 6L80 to really be tucked up into the tunnel because it is much girthier. It's a lot taller this way than the factory transmission. So in turn, the pan was gonna sit really low. The driveline angle was gonna be just buggered up because if you think about it, if the transmission is all the way back in the tunnel where the factory one was, it's gonna have to be tilted down more. So when I mocked everything up, I pretty much mocked it up in a way where the driveline angle is just about perfect where it needs to be. And in turn, that put the transmission and the engine further up into the bay, which isn't a big deal, but yeah, the drive shaft is gonna have to be lengthened like close to 5 inches. Now, next video, we're gonna be working on getting this thing hooked up. So we're gonna hook up the wiring, all the engine wiring, run the wires down to the transmission. I wanna work on the front end, so get the radiator installed, the AC condenser installed, see if I can find some hoses, as well as get the power steering hooked up.